facing 45 years in prison. Bad cop of the two says, "We know you've been giving information to the Guantanamo defense attorneys." Wait a minute. Are you investigating me? What the fuck is wrong with you? Do you have any idea how many times I've made that pitch? Shame on you, cold pitching me like that. One day in January of 2012, so I've been out of the Senate for about 9 months, the FBI calls. And I look at my cell phone, it says Federal Bureau of Investigation. I was like, I wonder what that's all about. So I answer, and they said, "Hey, you remember that thing you helped us out with a year ago?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We've got a similar situation and we need your help." And again, because I'm a patriot, I said, "Anything for the FBI." I kick myself now for saying it. I said, "Anything for the FBI. What do you want me to do?" They said, "Come down to the Washington field office Thursday morning at 10. I said, "Done." So they said, "Well, before we start, just wanted to ask you, just read your book. It was great. I loved it. Hey, what about this that you said in your book?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was a cool story. What about this other thing?" "Yeah, I had fun." I said, "It was kind of hard. It took me 9 months to write the book, 22 months to get it cleared." "Oh, yeah, you got it cleared." "Yeah, of course I got it cleared. 22 months it took me to get it cleared." And I'm thinking, what an odd question. Then they start asking me about something called the Sam Adams Project. And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what that means." And then the bad cop of the two says, "We know you've been giving information to the Guantanamo defense attorneys." I said, "What are you talking about?" And then I said, "Wait a minute. Are you investigating me?" And they said, "Yeah, and we're raiding your house right now as we speak." And I said, thank God. I said, "I want to speak to my attorney right now." That was the only reason that they... So I called the attorney as soon as I got out of the office. Actually, when I was walking out, one of them went over to... I didn't know it at the time, but it was Peter Strzok. And Peter Strzok says, "Tell me he implicated himself." And the guy said, "Not really, no. We have to let him go." And so I grabbed my cell phone and I left, went to the attorney's office. They had already called my attorney and said they were charging me with espionage. I hadn't committed espionage. They knew I hadn't committed espionage. And in fact, since then, I'm fast forwarding a lot, 3 FBI agents have reached out to me. Well, 2 to my attorneys. One reached out to me directly to apologize, saying that this came from the top. They thought it was a BS case. They were sorry they were involved, but there was nothing they could do. So it became a matter of just survival after that. You know, you have to take it seriously. I was facing 45 years in prison. And then when the Justice Department made a request for a proffer meeting, the proffer meeting is they'll give you a little idea of what they have against you, and then they make an offer. You can take it or leave it. And they offered me 45 years. And I said, "I'm not doing 45 minutes. I didn't do anything wrong." And this woman, she became Deputy Attorney General for the criminal division under Biden. She said, "Take this deal, Mr. Kiriakou, and you may live to meet your grandchildren."
Oh, my God.
Oh, it was... I went home that night, and I went home. I'm ashamed to even say it. That night, we put the kids to bed, and my wife and I were watching TV, and she said, "Come on, let's go to bed." And I said, "I can't sleep. There's no way I'm going to be able to sleep." And she said, "No, come on, let's go to bed." She knew I was going to go down into the garage, turn the car on, and just lay across the back seat. And she said, "No, come on. You need to try to get some sleep." And she saved me that night. But 45 years? And so they waited 10 months before they were even willing to engage in a conversation. And then they offered 10 years on a Monday. On Wednesday, they offered 8. And on Friday, they offered 5. My lead attorney was this legendary guy named Plato Kacharis. And Plato said, "You know, I've been a criminal defense attorney in this city for 52 years. And this is the first time I've ever seen them come down in time." He said, usually they offer you 10, you say no, the next offer's 15, then the next offer's 20. I said, why are they coming down in time? He said, because they have a shit case and they know it's shit. And that's why we're going to go to trial and we're going to win this thing. I said, great. Well, they stayed at 5. And then they came back and they said 3.5. And I said, I'm going to trial. I'm going to win this thing. Turned out at the time, my best friend, his wife, had an uncle who was O.J. Simpson's jury consultant. And she called him for me and she said, hey, my friend John, he's in this situation. He's like, yeah, I read about this in the papers. He could use your help. He came up, didn't charge me a cent. He came up to Washington. We got him a security clearance, and which was another thing. We asked for a security clearance, and then the Justice Department called and said, the White House said Kiriakou's attorneys have enough security clearances. And I said, who at the White House said we have enough security clearances? Well, they had to tell us that it was John Brennan. No more attorneys for Kiriakou. Fisher cut bait. We're like, it's not up to John Brennan to decide if I have enough attorneys. Yeah, they have an unlimited number of attorneys, an unlimited budget. As it turned out, they spent $6 million to put me in prison. Was society really better off spending $6 million to put me in a low-security prison for 23 months? So, in the end, they said, best and final offer, 30 months, you do 23. Well, I was only the second American who had ever been charged with this crime of violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act of 1982. The only other person that was charged with it was a woman named Sharon Scranage. She was a CIA secretary in Ghana in the 80s. And she was having an affair with a member of Ghana's intelligence service. And in the course of pillow talk, she revealed the names of all of the CIA officers in the station and the names of the sources they were running. And so the Ghanaians executed these guys.
Oh, my God.
She got 9 months in prison. 9 months. And they offer me 45 years for blowing the whistle on the torture program. And because Sharon Scranage had taken a plea, there was literally no case law. So what we found several things. We found several articles from the Harvard Law Review saying this law is unconstitutional. It violates the First Amendment, and it is prior restraint, right? Like it tells you in advance you can't say X, Y, and Z. But because there was no case law, you couldn't challenge it in court. And I said, well, can't we just appeal the charge and maybe, all the way up to the Supreme Court? And they said, yeah, we can do that post-conviction. And then you're going to be 45 years waiting and hoping that the Supreme Court does the right thing. We can't do that. So I decided by 6 a.m., I'm going to turn it down. I believed in my heart I hadn't done anything right. This was political. It was a vendetta by John Brennan. And Obama, by all accounts, I had friends, of course, who were still working at the agency and working at the CIA or at the White House, and they said that Obama had this Nixonian obsession with national security leaks. So he did what John Brennan told him to do, and Brennan said, "You got to crack down on these leaks. They do nothing but embarrass us." So I decided I'm going to turn it down. 6 a.m., I send an email to my attorneys. I had 11 attorneys. And then one of them writes back and says, put on a pot of coffee. We'll be at the house by 7. So they come to my house. The 4 main ones came to the house. Plato was the first one in. Now imagine this, like 80-year-old, 6'2", 280-pound, mean old man. He comes in and I said, good morning, Plato. And he said, you stupid son of a bitch, take the deal. Like that. I said, take the deal? You're the one that told me not to take the deal. You're the one who told me we're going to go to trial and win this thing. And he says, I only told you that to keep your spirits up.
Oh, God.
And then the second one, his partner, Bob Trout, a sweet gentleman, a Southern gentleman. He says, if you were my own brother, I would beg you to take this deal. And I'm like, now what do I do? And then the third who was the guy, Mark McDougall, one of the best attorneys I've ever encountered in my life. And the one that I liked and respected the most out of all of them. I liked all of them and respected all of them, but I felt a connection to this guy. He pulls me aside. He was a little bit angry, and he said, "You know what your problem is? Your problem is you think this is about justice, and it's not about justice. It's about mitigating damage. Take the deal." So I took the deal.